Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're having a magnificent day. Today, I have for you new audio settings, which you may be able to distinguish between already in comparison to the old ones. It should be slightly clearer, slightly louder for sure. And the issue where it would stop and they would have that gap of essentially no audio, hopefully that has been changed via a filter I put on. Then, when it comes to everything you need to know, we've got one that's not only very interesting, but will potentially be my favorite one yet. We've got a very new and fresh perspective on Liverpool double game week assets. I've got a new perspective on the Everton double game week assets. We'll be looking at whether we should sell Phil Foden. We shall be looking at whether we should sell other players and a look ahead, including chip strategy and a few other things. So I'm very much looking forward to this video. It should be very interesting. You guys have responded wonderfully to my request for an increase in likes on the video. So you know what? This one will go for 4,400 because I'm bullish on the video, and if we could push to 7,000 subscribers as well, I would be greatly appreciative of that. Maybe 6,250 by the time that team selection is out. Without anything else needing to be said, let's hop into it. You will notice there is an absence of discussion on Mohamed Salah and Luis Diaz in this section. Salah, given I'm sure you own him, and Diaz, given whilst I don't think it's the worst move in the world by any means, I do think the expected minutes will be reduced and you potentially see him not start a game with Nunes start up top. And I really don't think he's going to get many minutes at left wing. And then in general, when it comes to the squad structure, I think him taking up a mid slot at his price is, I'm going to say, somewhat unacceptable at this point for myself when you consider the other Liverpool assets on offer and also the likes of Brian Mbeumo, Phil Foden, Anthony Gordon, all just waiting to take a spot in your team, not to mention all of the others as well, right? So that's why there's no mention of those two. Now, I expressed in the introduction how I was very much excited for this section, and it's because I have a slightly fresh perspective on how we should be interpreting these Liverpool double game week assets. We all know that you can't just interpret it in terms of isolation, right? You can't just hold every other variable constant, including price, and then just be like, oh, Trent's got a higher likelihood of generating output than Van Dijk and Konate, so I'm going to buy him. But I don't think it's just about price. I think you also really need to look at your specific team and the opportunities you are going to block yourself from or allow yourself to access via going for different players. It's really about combinations of players as opposed to just Trent versus Van Dijk. Because Van Dijk's 0.8 and will be 0.9 million cheaper than Trent by the time you see this. That 0.9 million could be spent elsewhere. For example, João Pedro to Yohan Wissa. I really wouldn't be surprised if Yohan Wissa outscores him quite significantly, or at least by a decent margin in the next 4 to 5 game weeks. Now, if Trent outscores Van Dijk, but by a smaller margin, all of a sudden, the actual better choice is Van Dijk. And that's why I really, really think when you are looking at these Liverpool assets, you cannot just be like, okay, Trent is better than Van Dijk, so I'm going to sacrifice elsewhere. Because if the sacrifice you're making elsewhere is bigger, and it'll be hidden, right? You have to interpret what you think the expected points for these players will be. You can't just rely on models to do that. Then you're making a mistake. So I really do think you should be looking at how your squad looks like in a few weeks with the transfers you make, because everything has huge implications right now. You make one wrong move, it could take your team in an entirely different direction, and you could be on the end of a huge swing. And honestly, it'll be somewhat justified given you didn't look right. So I really would consider things from a far broader perspective and see the implications you have down the line. Now, I say that because you will see that I have a slightly different perspective on the assets now as a result of that. And okay, fine. Let's say Trent and Van Dijk, right? Trent is in isolation probably a better asset, if not definitely. But the difference between him and Van Dijk, I would like you to somewhat quantify. Just try and quantify it so that you can realize the actual difference between them and then compare that to other price points and see if it's actually worth it when you look at it in terms of combinations of players. One asset that I really don't like, well, it's not that I really don't like him, I just don't think he's optimal for this current setup, is Allison. Now, I have two issues with him. One, he will permanently act as a blocker in your squad. He's 5.4, 5.5 million. Okay, fine, rise at the same price. But everyone else, Sells, Pickford, Sanchez, Henderson, Verbruggen, Flecken, all 5 million and below. So that 0.5, that 0.8, that 1 million that you're saving there, you will permanently be able to use in the rest of your squad because you're not really going to take Allison out once you've transferred him in right now. Because it's largely an inefficient use of a transfer. So personally, I wouldn't go there. And secondly, we talk a lot about ceilings on this channel, on high ceilings and winning positions, and we will come on to winning positions later. I wouldn't say his ceiling's that high because for him to get bonus points, a very specific set of conditions must manifest themselves. One, he's got to get a lot of saves, and Liverpool still have to keep a clean sheet, which is somewhat unlikely. But then also, Salah can't go berserk, Gakpo can't go berserk, Trent can't go berserk, because they're all Van Dijk. They're all better than him naturally on the bonus point system. So it's very difficult to attain that higher ceiling anyway. And as such, for all of those reasons, and when it comes to squad structure, I just wouldn't be going there. Now, with this subject, I certainly have a fresh perspective, which I would like to share with you. Let's start with Virgil van Dijk, the skipper. The expected minutes are pristine, 90 every game, and you really don't need to worry. There's not even a little bit of doubt. You know, as long as he's fit, he plays, and he plays every game, right? So available, and that is such a good quality you have in FPL, but also as a player. And it's one of the reasons he's cemented himself, almost undoubtedly, as the best centre-back in the world in recent times, and for many years now. If you look at Liverpool's set-piece routines, they're actually copying Arsenal somewhat, crowding the back post. Van Dijk would do the Gabriel role, where he stands in the middle, and they have one marking him, and then he tries to make a movement either to the left, front post, or depending on where it's coming from, front post or back post, to really be the target and the receiver for the ball. Now, that's good for him, albeit Liverpool aren't quite as good at executing their set pieces as Arsenal have been. And the other thing is, I actually think Rice's set piece delivery might genuinely be the best in the league at the moment. It's okay, fine. Even if it's not the best in the league, he's tier 1, right? And I honestly don't know if Trent's from set pieces, from corners specifically, is better than his, because the swing Rice gets on it, how he's gotten it, is absolutely brilliant. So that's another reason why I don't think it's so good. And they're probably not as well drilled on it. And I imagine the Arsenal set piece coach is a little bit better as well. Okay, so that's all good. However, what is the real likelihood of him scoring in this next span of 4 games? Well, Ipswich ranked second in the Championship last year for defending set pieces in terms of the goals they conceded. Second best. That is very impressive. And one thing you may not have noticed against Manchester City, and I think I'm right in saying this, City did not cross a single corner from the corner into that Ipswich box. Rather, they went short every time and tried to manufacture something. Now, whether they went and crossed it from that position, yeah, okay. But the reason they did that in the first place was really to try and manufacture something, because to score against Ipswich from a corner is difficult. And now, with the signings they're making and the players they have, they actually are a bit of a threat on the counter from corners. So I don't think the likelihood of them scoring is too high, and Virgil scoring from a corner is too high against Ipswich. I also don't think it's so high against Everton, for obvious reasons. They are immense in their own box. And Bournemouth away, in terms of set pieces, Bournemouth are okay / good. But that's not that easy. Wolves at home is wonderful, but that's the last of the 4. So for all of those reasons, I'm not so sure that the likelihood of him scoring is that high. Could he do so? Yes, of course. He's their main aerial threat, and he's good in the air. And I guess the stats would say that he's still got at least one more goal in him this season. However, for these particular games, I wouldn't say it's the most likely occurrence, albeit still a possibility. Now, as a counter to that, he's very good on the bonus point system. But there's a reason there's marks around the very good. He is 4th for the amount of bonus points generated on the system, yet he only has 3 bonus points this year. Basically, what it tells you is that if he gets an attack and return, getting a bonus and a lot of it, but when he doesn't, given the likes of Gakpo, Trent, and Salah, probably even better than him on the bonus point system, they just take it away from him. So that is something to consider, right? When you get it, you'll get it good and you'll get it big. But when you don't, you're really looking at like 6 and potentially 7 points. That's on the assumption they keep a clean sheet. Which brings me to my next point, Ibrahim Konate. 5.1 million, 1.3 million less. You would say that Van Dijk gives you the security of expected minutes and more aerial threat, which is what you're paying for. 1.3 million, especially at the moment, is a lot. And one thing we've spoken about on this channel as a trend is not to spend so much money on defense at the moment. Now, at 1.3 million less, I actually think you're getting very, very similar, if not the same expected minute. I showed you the schedule that Liverpool have with Gakpo last week, or last game week. And one of the assumptions I made was that he would start the game against Lille, and I would have had the same assumption for Konate, just so that they get top spot wrapped up. Now, they very much got it wrapped up, I would say. I doubt they lose away to PSG. And as such, I don't think he's going to play that game if he didn't play this game. Which means that the 4 Premier League games, given how the schedule is, I really do think he starts all of them. I think he'll start against Spurs at home as well. And then he'll miss the game against Plymouth. It would just make a lot of sense, right, in which to manage him. Statistically, he's actually not that far off this season in terms of XG or XGI generated from set pieces. And in general, he's actually an underrated threat, I would say, in FPL and set pieces, because he always just seems to score in the Champions League. He was honestly a monster in the air as well. Now, the set piece routine doesn't favor him, but he's still in and around there, and he's probably the second biggest threat they have. Now, as long as his knee holds up and he's taking painkillers, and he's mentioned that he rushed back from injury because of the injury to Joe Gomez, as long as his knee holds up, I'm not so sure that Virgil van Dijk really is worth 1.3 more than Konate. I don't think you're getting that much of a difference. Now, if they were facing four sides that were very poor in the air from set pieces, yeah, I think I could entertain that more. But after looking at it a little bit deeper and just trusting the fact that maybe Konate's knee will be okay for 4 games, and the fact you'll get a little bit lucky, right? You are getting less of an aerial threat, less of a bonus threat, slightly less secure expected minutes at least. If you can get a bit lucky, you can save 1.3 million here and use it elsewhere. And with how the game is structured at the moment, given how our squads are structured, I think that is huge. And it's honestly potentially a good gamble to take, and a calculated one at that. So that is my analysis on Konate and Van Dijk and summary, and of how it's actually probably closer than the price would dictate it. Okay, moving on to Trent. Now, Trent, I would say, out of the rest, is the best. He is almost undoubtedly the best. However, he's very expensive. At 7.2, and when you're watching this, 7.3 million, he's very expensive. I know a lot of you own him, but some of you, just in certain squad structures, could even consider selling him and moving the funds elsewhere to fund something else if you think that is beneficial for your squad, or to just facilitate Foden whilst you're getting triple Liverpool in, as an example, right? And we'll come on to all of this later and in this section. What I would say is his output, the likelihood of output is certainly down, and compared to seasons gone by. And as such, I wonder if the difference between him and Van Dijk, or him and Konate, is actually worth the difference in price. Look, I said he's the best, but from a strategic standpoint, if you can get the money out and you can get a bit lucky, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk about with Trent. To go against him, you do need to get a little bit lucky for it to go right for you. But if it does, you make a huge gain over the field. And I don't actually think losing it, I don't think it's that difficult to lose small, even if he does return. Because for him to return and for you to lose big, he would have to clean and keep getting an attack on return. But if he doesn't, given the changes to the bonus structure, it's going to be difficult for him to return and accumulate bonus when Liverpool concede. So I actually think the downside is somewhat limited given the changes to the bonus structure, especially if you're going Van Dijk, who's in general more of a goal threat, so he can compete with him in that sense, where Trent is more of an assist threat, and obviously at a low volume for the output, but nonetheless, he's a goal threat if you get it, and he's obviously very good on the bonus point system as well. Now, Trent has more bonus points on the system than any other defender in the league, so you have to account for that and adjust the downside accordingly. But I just think from a strategic standpoint, if you are willing to try and get a little bit lucky, this is not that bad of a spot in which to exploit or take on. Bournemouth away is tough, I would say, for keeping a clean sheet. I'm not sure if anyone's kept a clean sheet there this season. Ipswich at home, Wolves at home is good, I would say, for attacking returns. And Everton away probably as well, right? I'm not trying to take anything away from Trent. I'm just trying to show it to you from a different lens. Now, I do not think he's essential, right? There are many people who have had many good seasons up to this point who haven't owned Trent. And as such, I would just consider it. I don't think he's an absolute necessity in the same way that I did previously. And this isn't coming from a point of bias. I can very well go and get Trent, and that has always been the plan. But I'm just open to a new possibility here. From back to front, now we move on to Mr. Cody Gakpo. Similar to Ibrahim Konate, I think he gets 4 starts in the next 4 Premier League games. The only thing with him is that PSV game, I'm still concerned that he might start just because it's his old club. And as such, given that's on the 29th of Jan and Bournemouth is on the 1st of Feb, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 60 in each. And you know what? If that's the case, then so be it. I don't mind getting 140, 150 minutes out of him for the double game week. Probably 150. I think he'll play 90. His expected minutes have been better as of late. And then when you take into account Jota's injury as well, the fact that I really think that he's got the left wing spot nailed down. Diaz has barely played there as of late, and is Diaz and Nunes competing for the number 9. His expected minutes shouldn't just be around 65 or 70, but I think pushing 90 or at least 80 plus. Okay, so that's that. And like I said, I think he'll start the same games that Konate starts and miss the same games that Konate will tonight. Now, there's a lot of upside associated to him, but Ipswich at home in particular, given that's in the short term or the immediate term, and maybe that's shifting my lens to seeing him in a more attractive light. But the fact that I get immediate upside, I do like it. I looked at my own team and I could even restructure. I could get him this week, restructure and get him out and still have triple Liverpool in the form of double defense. But that's not the point. The point is that in this particular week, I think there's a lot of upside, especially what we saw from Ipswich against Manchester City. And as such, I would just quite like him. I think it's a very attractive prospect. And you consider he's very good on the bonus points. And yeah, sure, he hasn't hauled too much this season. But one thing I've noticed with him is there's a lot of nearly moments, and he's getting enough volume of potential attacking opportunities to return. And as such, there are a variety of routes, not just when he cuts inside, but he can hit across the keeper, he can score headers, he can score from wide, he can score from a little bit narrower when he arrives. So all of those things, I think, bode very well for him. He's obviously not obviously, but he is very good on the bonus point system as well. So I actually like a lot about this, and I'm higher on it than I initially was. I even recorded with Jack earlier today on Fantasy Football Hub, which you can watch, which was team specific, and we spoke about some other things. And I wasn't as high on him then. I wasn't even considering going for him then. He wasn't in my top 3 at least. But now, once I thought about it more, I just like him more and more. And another reason why that's the case is I think the downside is somewhat limited to him. Because he's at the same price point as pretty much all the... Okay, fine, Wish is 6'2", and he's 7'4". Jackson's more expensive. Chris Wood is basically the same. Cunha's basically the same. Mateta's basically the same. They're all about the same, right? Whereas like Trent and Van Dijk, they're so much more expensive. The opportunity cost of having them, getting it wrong, and then other assets hauling in other places that you simply won't be able to afford, e.g. Foden, reasons that, like, from a strategic sense, again, it's not such a bad idea to avoid them. There's less downside here, right? As a result. So I really think you should consider it. And now we will move on to the conclusion. As you can probably have guessed, I have really shifted perspective. I'm far more bullish on getting Cody Gakpo, and I very much do think that I will have him for Game Week 23. Now, who will accompany him in that Liverpool triple up? I'm not so sure yet, but following the analysis that I've done today, following my new perspective, which I honestly gave some serious thought to, and I gave myself a number of hours just to let it sink in and just kind of rotate my viewpoint just to see if I was missing anything. And honestly, I do think that the appeal of Trent and Van Dijk in particular compared to what it was prior, and if you consider I was going for them as a double up and almost guaranteed, I think I've slightly reduced my expectations of what they can do. Or to put it better, I'm just think from a strategic standpoint, it doesn't make as much sense. And we'll talk about winning positions in the next slide. But for those reasons, I'm not so against leaving both of them out for your double game week setup if you do like Gakpo and you agree with my analysis on Konate. Actually, before I go to the next slide, I would like to say I obviously rate Trent and Van Dijk higher than Konate in isolation. But this is not a game where you can just view things in isolation, especially not with the landscape in the way that it is at the moment, and not with how the squad structures are at the moment. We have 2 managers who are in the top 50 in the world for FPL in our community. And since they've joined, they've only experienced more success. We have someone who joined the community not so long ago, it wasn't started so long ago, around 300k, and now finds themselves closer to 50k than they do 100k. And we have other success stories of a similar nature. So, whilst I'm not saying that if you join, you're guaranteed to see a bunch of green arrows, maybe you get 100 red arrows in a row, not just for this season, but the seasons that follow. What I do offer you is a potential chance, and a good chance of that, to improve your rank, given the quality of managers in there, given the discussions that are being had, given the love for FPL, thus the detail and attention tied to the subject. And not only that, if you would like to join the Diamond section, of course, you get these 1-hour Q&A calls, which largely extend past it, where we go into stuff in an even deeper manner. You get your team looked at individually, or at least you should, and we do a lot more tactical. That's not to mention the exclusive WhatsApp community or the exclusive football analysis. So if you would like to get in on a bit of that, just join with the membership link below. Minimum downside, maximum upside. From one doubling team to the other. My new outlook on Everton assets, well, half of them at least. I share a similar view that I did prior on Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Ndiaye. Why? Well, firstly, I think their realistic ceilings are both still quite low. Yes, they scored against Spurs and they both look relatively good. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin accumulated few big chances. But one thing you have to take into account is finishing, as we have seen with Nicholas Jackson, and as we have seen with Dominic Calvert-Lewin earlier this season. You really, really do. And the likelihood of him getting 2 returns in a game as such, I think is fairly low. And Ndiaye more so for his positioning. I think it's improved now, given they're playing a new system. But with the service that these guys get in general, I personally don't think that they are worth it in terms of their ceiling. The opportunity cost for that spot is very high. Mateta has good fixtures and is in brilliant form and looks really good. He was monstrous against West Ham. And that's one person. Cody Gakpo, someone who I've just picked up. Another person. Isak takes up a forward spot, so I guess you could talk about opportunities there. Albeit you're probably on him, right? So I'll leave that to the side. Johan Wissa, especially for the fixtures coming up in 24 to 26. João Pedro is a cheap facilitator. And there's others that I haven't touched on as well. Oh, Chris Wood, obviously. I mainly try to erase him from my memory. So the opportunity cost is very high. You probably have to use a transfer to get rid of them because after the double, the fixture is not particularly attractive for a forward, especially an Everton forward, with all due respect. And even their floors aren't particularly. It's not like you can rely on them to put up 5 points a game. Let's take Trent as an example, right? Obviously, his output is down this year, so maybe you can't rely on him for the ceiling at such a consistent rate as you did in the past. However, Liverpool's defense is far more secure, and he's got so many routes to attacking points anyway that even if he doesn't clean, he's always got that avenue to a 5-6 point. So the floor is very, very stable, even though you're paying quite a bit. That's not really the case with DCL and Ndiaye. But personally, for me, I would just stay away, mainly because of the opportunity cost, the ceilings, just everything listed right. I really don't like it. I like it a little bit more than I did last week. However, Jordan Pickford and Vitaly Mykolenko, I actually like quite a bit. Mykolenko is so cheap. 4.3 million is dirt cheap at the moment, right? Because when you consider the starting 4.0s are all like 4.1, 4.2 now as well, 4.3 is so cheap. He's also playing in this wing-back role. Now, I don't think you can expect such a high level of output from him. That's not really his game, not really a skill set. But you never know, you might be able to get one return, and even one return would be really good in the short term. With the way they're playing at the moment, new manager bounce as well, probably quite confident. I don't think clean sheets are impossible, and it's Everton, right? They're one of the sides that keep clean, who are slightly lower down the table. Pickford's obviously got a high ceiling as a result because of the volume of shots they face, the same he accumulates, and he's not too expensive. Probably just on the cusp of where I think it is acceptable to spend on a goalkeeper at the moment. Once you make the investment, you don't really need to sell him. Mykolenko is a wonderful facilitator. They have great fixtures in 28 and 29. And even the ones beforehand, for Pickford especially, they're whole-life fixtures. United at home, with the way United are playing. Palace away, that's a whole-life fixture. It's not a definite that Palace are going to... They're not Liverpool. Or even Liverpool aren't a definite against Everton. But you know what I mean. And Brentford, yeah, fine, that'll be tough. But not the end of the world. Like, it is the type of game where if Pickford's going to return, he's going to be huge. So that is another thing to consider. So it's a fairly decent move as long as it's an efficient free transfer. So for all of those reasons, I actually quite like them. And obviously, they're doublers. So you get an extra game, right? And with a goalkeeper especially, I would say it's quite a big deal. And to be honest, all over the pitch. So for all of those reasons, I've warmed to the selection quite a bit. And I would at least put them on your radar, especially if you have a defensive slot that you don't really like, or you need to downgrade potentially to free up some cash. The extra game and one being Leicester at home, albeit I don't think that's a slam dunk clean sheet, is still pretty decent. And then Pickford, get rid of Sanchez, you want to get rid of pretty much any goalkeeper, even downgrade like a Raya or an Allison. I don't think it's such a bad shout to facilitate cash elsewhere. I wasn't actually going to do a section on this, and then I remembered that an above average amount of views on this channel compared to the rest of the field would probably own him, and as such, it would make sense to do so. My perspective has certainly shifted from the time he hauled to now. I am more and more likely to keep him, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep him. I'm quite confident I will. There's a few things. We're going to discuss the strategic element and the way I see the game, and then we'll move on to him specifically and the interpretation of his fixtures, which you may have seen on X that my perspective hasn't exactly been welcomed. Just fair enough. Everyone has their own opinion. What he gives you that so few give, especially considering you can access higher levels, is a huge and somewhat realistic season. Why? What's he got that most don't have? He has elite ball strikers. And he's also got a manager, right, who, as of last game, put him back in his position. That right-sided 10. Now, you'll say he was playing as the right-sided winger. And I completely agree. He really was. But it was a false right-wing role. And I spoke about this in my match analysis on transfer plans, and you can go back and watch that. I spoke about how it was really a false hybrid right-wing role. He didn't really occupy the wide areas too much. Gundo would drop deeper. He would occupy that right half space. And when he shoots from there, you're in trouble. You're in big trouble. And he can score a lot of goals in games. And just look at last season. Big hauls, hat-tricks, and big hauls, right? And we talk a lot about, on this channel, winning, right? And not settling for just top 10. Really going for the highest rank possible. Not just a top 10, but a number one. And how the focus, in my opinion, should be there. And given it's my channel, that is what I am going to try and gear you towards. That is just my perspective. And my philosophy on the game. I'm quite set in stone on that. And he is putting ourselves in winning positions because he is allowing us to access that huge ceiling from a realistic standpoint that many others can't. Brian and Mbeumo, I would put in the same category. But obviously, Salah and Palmer, yes, but they're so much more expensive. But anyone else, probably not. Like, honestly, in the game, probably not. And even Isak, because of the fact he's a forward, I don't think accesses the same type of ceiling that Foden does. So for all of those reasons, I really like him. Then moving on to him, he's such a good player. He's in a team that might just click, and they've got so much talent anyway. I still think you need an appreciation for that. They've got the best manager of all time, and the ceiling just discussed. But it's very difficult to justify selling because it is a typical example of what I don't like, but to an extreme extent. It is a huge amount of downside to selling him because, like I said, one haul will wipe you out in terms of the points that you have lost, in terms of what you could have gained. And wherever else you go, the upside to him, when I say him, the other asset you'll bring in, probably isn't as much. Now, of course, earlier in the video, I spoke about combinations of players. However, I did provide you with somewhat of a solution around that, showing you that there are cheaper facilitators who are doing the job at the moment and have been doing so for the entirety of this season. So that is my pitch for not selling Phil Foden, because I really don't think you should. He is putting you in a winning position, and he himself is a winning position. Now let's talk about the fixtures, and that's one of the main reasons, as opposed to price, if not only the other reason why people are considering selling him. Let's look at it as a 3-game week span. Forget the rest for now. Chelsea at home is not that bad. You ask any Chelsea fan, including myself, is our defense bad? No, it's not. It's absolutely not. Is it elite though? No, and it's not even close to being elite, especially if Romeo Lavia is not fit for the game at the Etihad. There's no reason why they shouldn't score. You would expect them to score. You would expect them to probably score more than one, especially if they find form, especially if they have found form following Ipswich. They click. And especially given his form, there's no reason he can't return. Okay, so that fixture's fine. Now, Arsenal away, super tough. I'm not arguing that. But a Saliba-less Arsenal away, that's more so open for interpretation. That will still be very tough, but it's not that bad. However, I spoke of it as a 3-game week span. Newcastle at home. Just saw what Bournemouth did to them. With Tonali at the base, they're still very susceptible on transition, I think. And in general, they just don't have the dueling capacity at the base of midfield that I would like. Obviously, Bruno G really puts in a shift. Even things like Hall, getting him 1v1, you can isolate him and beat him quite consistently. I think all of those things mean that Newcastle still have the capability to concede a fair few goals. Whereas with someone like Arsenal, even without Saliba, you can't really see that as much. And Chelsea and Newcastle are at home. So 2 out of 3 are at home, and 2 out of 3, there's opportunities there. And he's in some form. He's in some serious form. And City are just starting to pick it back up. If you take away the draw away at Brentford and you get that as a win and they didn't implode in the last minutes, well, all of a sudden the run actually looks quite impressive. Victories against Leicester, Brentford, West Ham, Ipswich, and one in the FA Cup as well. There's 5 on the bounce. And I think I'm forgetting one as well, on the assumption they didn't implode. It was actually pretty decent, right? Obviously, after that, you can interpret it slightly differently. Liverpool away, yeah, not great. I'm not arguing that. After that, it's Spurs. I think that's pretty good. And then it's Forest, and you'll say, oh, Forest away is really difficult. I think that's a Phil Foden type of game, though, where Haaland occupies a lot of the attention. He finds himself in the pockets, and in the pockets, you're in big trouble. And then it's Brighton at home, Leicester at home, which I think is absolutely fine. So for all of those reasons, even though he's so expensive relatively, he is so expensive, I personally don't think this is a sell. I think at least give him Chelsea at home and then see how things develop there. Yes, you may, in your situation, miss one of the Liverpool assets for Ipswich at home, and that's not great. But to be honest, you should still be able to get there. And if not, I still think, given how explosive he is and how consistent he can be on top of that, this just isn't a sell right now. Talking about selling players, we move on to solid sells. Now, not everyone on this page is a solid sell. In fact, I would say there are only 2 which are, or maybe 3, but nonetheless, given the first man on the list, I thought I had to title it this. For me, he just has to go. Even though the fixtures are actually quite good, and they still are good. Like City away is a good game for him. The transition monster, and monster maybe a bit of a threat, but he's seriously good transition. You've seen him hurt City before at the Etihad. You've seen his link play. You've seen his hold-up play. You've seen how he can drive. You've seen how he can exploit space in behind. And for all of those reasons, this is a good fixture for him. West Ham as well, they don't look great. I spoke about this in my match night. They really don't look great. And as such, you know, he's fine fixtures-wise. But with him missing this volume of chances and the fact that he doesn't really look particularly confident, I personally just think this is an absolute sell. You are taking away the ceiling from him, really. And when you take away a ceiling from a player, you know that I just don't really like him. So I think he has to go. And he's not particularly good on the bonus system at all. So yeah, has to go. Solid sell. That's putting it gently. Bruno Fernandes, I would say, as I say there, is an expensive risk. You can't trust Man United to produce you performances whereby it's likely that he returns. And you cannot really trust him to haul given the conditions he's got within his team at the moment. Expensive. Relatively speaking, he's really expensive. He's more expensive than Brian Mbeumo, for God's sake. And Brian Mbeumo is a top asset, and in my opinion, undoubtedly better than him and far more secure as well, with the capability to haul much bigger, realistic capability as well. So yes, it can go well. He's still Bruno. The fixtures aren't horrible, but I just think it is such an unnecessary risk to take, given the state of the game currently. Given that he might block some better Liverpool assets, especially if you think Trent and Virgil are so much higher than Konate and you don't want Gakpo, and therefore your squad structure is a bit different. I think he acts as a blocker to that. Maybe you can't keep Foden because you have him as well. Just so many things. Maybe you can't facilitate moves down the line because it's not just about 23, right? What happens next week, and I'll show you when we get to looking ahead, which is on the slide, with Brentford next week. You might really want Brentford after. And maybe he'll block Mbeumo, just in terms of the placeholder in midfield, but also Wissa due to the funds from João Pedro to Wissa. There are just so many negatives, I think, it's attached to Bruno. And I don't think he offers you enough upside like Foden does to offset that. So for me, this is sell. And I don't like the fixture either. Fulham away, not easy. Gabriel is something you were probably not expecting to see on here. High risk, high reward, that is for sure. What I would say is that 27 to 29 isn't so attractive. I think it's Forest, Man United, Chelsea. That's not great. He then has City next week, and even Wolves away without Saliba. I'm not sure is unbelievable, albeit Wolves have a lot of problems at the moment. 25, 26, Leicester away and West Ham at home, I think. Even if it's away, it's at home. Because we obviously got that Saka 18-pointer last time out as a captain. That is an opportunity for a haul and a 15-pointer. So you would probably want him for that, and losing him just means you expose yourself to mass downside. Hence why I say high risk, high reward. Because if you are to sell him for pretty much any other defender, probably a Liverpool one, get it right, a lot of upside associated. So it will be a swingy call, or maybe it won't, but it certainly has the capability to be a very swingy call. But considering some of you were considering it, I thought I would just speak about it. I probably wouldn't. I would try and fire away around it. I think from 25, 26, he's just so dangerous to your rank that's not worth it. And no one can really compete with his aerial threat in those beats and the goal threat as such. Sanchez, you may have noticed in transfer plans, I'm quite adamant I wasn't going to sell him. I'm far more on board with it. What I noticed was there's the potential for him to get rotated in, I think it is the Southampton game, when I looked at the Chelsea fixture run. It's not super likely, but there's a potential for it there. And as such, he'll lose one of his best fixture in the fixture set. City away this week, so immediate upside regardless of you transfer him to within reason. And also the likes of Flecken, Henderson, if you wish to go there, Verbruggen, they're all cheaper. So for all of those reasons, I'm a little bit more bullish on selling him. I would just say make sure it's an efficient use of transfer because it is a goalkeeper. Then the swings are never going to be as big there, or in general, there compared to other positions. But I'm more on board with it. Given the landscape established and how things are shaping up, it does not appear that FPL is in a particularly forgiving state at the moment. And as such, as I expressed in the Liverpool section, I think it is critical. It is so important, more important than it has been at any point in the season, to get your decisions right. Because the negative implications are huge, but so are the positive ones. So here are a couple of things that I think you should look at and could really help you in your FPL journey this season. 1, offloading for blank game week 20. You don't want to get to blank game week 29 and be stuck with 6 assets that are all going to blank and not many free transfers because you've been too aggressive in the few game weeks gone prior. So this is something to consider as of now. For example, I am looking at selling Anthony Gordon in game week 24 for Brian Mbeumo. That is offloading one Newcastle asset. One reason I'm willing to do this is, of course, because of upside associated to Brentford assets, but also because I know that he's going to become a little bit of an issue down the line as well. And getting him out now, even if I lose a couple of points here or there, I think in the long run, from a strategic standpoint, it should pay itself off. Not to mention the immediate upside with Brian Mbeumo and the fact that I think he's going to outscore him. So that's one thing that I think you should consider. I also think when it comes to offloading for Black Game Week 29, you shouldn't just automatically assume that are going to go through. I saw from Ben Krellin, who you should absolutely go and follow on X, his username is Ben Krellin, that it was a 62% chance of Liverpool going through. 98% of a chance is a lot for the other side to go through. If you think about it, you take a wheel, you spin it, you put 38% of the pie in Tottenham's favour. Fine, 38 out of 100 times, it will land on there. But the point is, it's not such an improbable event when you're running it one. And as such, I wouldn't let that deter you from making certain moves now with regards to Liverpool assets because they're going to blank in 29, or you play a little bit less aggressively now because you just assume that Liverpool are going to go through. Maybe Spurs go through and do you a favour, and maybe they even double in 25, and the whole landscape of FPL changes as a result. All things that I think you at least must give some consideration to, if not too much. Now, moving on, when it comes to looking ahead, I really think you should plan for this duo. Game week 24 to game week 26, I love it. Spurs at home, West Ham away. And from what I saw against Palace, there's returns there for both of them. And then Leicester away, there's returns for both of them in abundance in those three fixtures. When Brentford score, it's usually one of these two. When they assist, there's a high probability it's one of these two. Or maybe not so much in Mbeumo because he's only got 3 assists this season. But you know what I mean. When they score, it's usually one of these two. And as such, I think the ceilings associated to these guys are high. The floors associated are high. They're a very secure and safe source of points. I think it'll be difficult for anyone to do so much better than them. However, I do think it'll be somewhat easy for them to do so much better than someone else, right? I really, really, really would be planning for these two in 24. Double up. I love it at the moment. Just something to consider. Talking about something I love, something that I really don't, and that is the triple captaincy in 24. Now, given how things have lined up and the fact that we look to only have 3 double game weeks left, who knows, Spurs could go through and change that. Maybe another weather event hits and that gets changed. But at the moment, it looks like we have 3 double game weeks. 1 for the assistant manager, 1 for the bench boost, 1 for the triple captain. And if you don't use a chip in those game weeks, well, then you're just going to lose it for the double. You're not going to have the opportunity to score your chips in a double. You know what I mean when it comes to those 3. But triple caps in 24 is so unappealing. I mean, Bournemouth away, Everton away. Even from standpoint of it in isolation, going away to Bournemouth's tough, going away to Everton's tough. It's not fixtures where you would say, even from a stylistic standpoint, there's just a lot of goals and opportunities there for Salah. At least if, like, let's say Newcastle, right? Newcastle came to town. At least you know that you have the opportunity for a fair few past Newcastle in a game which is very transition-based in nature. Fine, Salah can hurt them. But here, you don't really see that. And also the fact that everyone else is doing that, I kind of don't like it either. So I would say when you consider that and the fact that neither Liverpool or Salah look like they're at the peak of what we've seen this season, again, puts me off a little bit. Part of me genuinely is considering holding out and just hoping another double game comes. And if not, I just play in a single and you know what, so be it. Because the likelihood of Salah putting up 20 points means that he has to haul goal and assist and then get a goal in another game as well, roughly speaking, right? Oh, sure, I'm super confident in that. Now, with that being said, I'll probably play it in 24. I just wanted to voice my dislike for it and potential, small potential, very small. Not acting like I'm going to go against it, probably. Very small potential that I do. And then when it comes to the assistant manager in double game 24, despise the use of it. I think when you can get to triple Liverpool so easily, and the fact that their points are not too far off the assistant manager chip in terms of that third slot, you should absolutely not get slot. And it's a chip with so much upside associated to it when used in a particular manner, when you used to target the 5-team rule. You'll probably have an opportunity down the line. Why block yourself off from that? It's like people who, for example, captained in single game weeks. Okay, fine, the double is not the most attractive one, but we didn't know that. We knew that we were going to get double game weeks where we had the opportunity to use a triple cap. And I would never block myself off from that. At least I wouldn't want to. So for me, is an absolute no-go in 24. Very much, for me, down the line, where there's more upside, far more upside associated. Also, the fixtures for Liverpool, you probably use it, in 23? Oh, no, you use it in 24, I guess. To be honest, actually, people are saying you use it in 24. Surely it would make more sense to use 23 to get Ipswich at home and Wolves at home, right? Okay, fine. Either side, the fixtures, there's not a, can't use it in 23. I'm going to leave that in there just because I like the video. It's very natural. I'm going to leave that in there. I apologize. That is my mistake. But yeah, even using it in 24, I just don't like it too much. And as a result of the rule of when it comes in, you're not getting it for Ipswich at home. Yeah, that is my dislike of the chip usage at the moment for both of them, but I'll probably be going with the triple captain. That is all she wrote for this video, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope you enjoyed. As mentioned previously, 400 likes is the target and a surge to 6,250 subscribers. That would be absolutely magnificent. I shall see you very soon for a team selection which you are not expecting. And I really did enjoy that video. So if you did as well, please do drop a comment and let me know, as well as if you have any questions, I will be happy to attend to that. I shall see you very soon for a very interesting team selection. Goodbye and have a good day.